Tonight, suspended disbelief after a mid-ride malfunction at Canada's Wonderland.
I was thinking I was not going to see my mom again.
She's very traumatized, like she's crying in her sleep.
The latest from the investigation into what went wrong, leaving riders trapped for half an hour upside down.
Anybody that might want to change it in the future will have to present legislation in order to do that.
I don't trust this government at all to fix a mess of their own making.
Plus, pushing past controversy, the Ford government promises new Greenbelt legislation while the opposition continues to hammer on about how the land swap deal ever happened in the first place.
We need to get the SAG-AFTRA strike solved before we will see a return to full production levels in Toronto.
And film and TV productions still on pause. Why the tentative deal for Hollywood writers isn't enough to quell the unease for productions here in Toronto. Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Glover. We begin tonight north of the city, where the country's largest theme park is apologizing after one of its rides trapped passengers upside down for a half an hour over the weekend. Now the provincial regulator has been called in to investigate what went wrong, and Anam Khan has the frightening moments for riders and what Wonderland is doing about it.
It's been 2 days since Soma Adima marked the end of summer with her friends at Wonderland. What was supposed to be an unforgettable day at the theme park near her house turned into a nightmare.
I was thinking I was not going to see my mom again.
She's been reliving the moments of Saturday night through videos capturing a mid-ride malfunction.
No way.
Just before the park closed, she and her friends were among those trapped on Lumberjack. Wonderland now confirms people were stuck upside down on the ride for 30 minutes.
She's very traumatized, like she's crying in her sleep, like she's talking in her sleep, and she keeps waking up. So because I have to assess her, she won't even walk to go upstairs.
Odima's mother worries her daughter hasn't been the same since, complaining of constant headaches.
Because I'm a nurse myself, and I'm just thinking, okay, so could it cause lumps of blood hemorrhage going to the brain? What would happen to her after? I'm just monitoring to see what happens with the headaches.
The park says riders were rescued just after 11 p.m. In a statement, Wonderland says 2 guests reported chest pain and were attended to at the park's health center before being released without need for further medical attention. The safety of our guests is always our top priority. Wonderland says an investigation is ongoing, and the provincial regulator says the ride will be shut down until that probe is complete.
Being stuck like this in an upside down position, extremely unusual and something that we need to prevent going forward.
The Technical Standards and Safety Authority says it's gathering information to find out what went wrong. While that investigation continues, Wonderland has apologized and offered freebies, including a pass to next month's Halloween festivities. But Adima says it's not enough to compensate for what she's going through.
I don't think I want to go for a ride, at least for like a few months or years.
Adima says she has a doctor's visit this week to find out more about the headaches, but feeling ready to return to one of her favorite parks, that will take much longer. Anam Khan, CBC News, Vaughan.
Taking you now to another active day at Queen's Park. Provincial politicians were back debating in the chamber today after the summer break. But with intense scrutiny over Ford's now reversed Greenbelt land swap, it's almost like summer break never happened. Lorenda Redekop has a wrap of what happened at QP today.
It is now time.
Question period kicked off back after a 15-week break, and the opposition leader hammered away at the premier over the Greenbelt.
How can people trust this premier to work for them when he has spent the last 5 years putting his friends and insiders first? Will the premier finally come clean and explain his personal involvement in the Greenbelt scandal? My question to the premier is, has he spoken to the RCMP?
Ford tried to shift to other topics, building housing or the economy.
Is it better now than it was 5 years ago? It's not a little better. It's not 10% better. It's 1,000 times better.
Ford apologized last Thursday for his Greenbelt plan and reversed his government's decision to take out protected lands for housing development.
That's what you call leadership, admitting if there was a mistake, moving forward.
The Auditor General had found the land swap would have benefited a few landowners by $8.3 billion in property values. Marit Stiles did get one clear answer from the housing minister.
How much is this government's Greenbelt disaster going to cost Ontario's taxpayers?
Mr. Speaker, nothing. Nothing, Mr. Speaker.
All three opposition parties are trying to keep the pressure on Ford. The NDP leader moved a motion to return the Greenbelt lands.
Those opposed will please say nay.
But it failed to even make it past first reading. The housing minister promising to bring up his own motion later this week.
Anybody that might want to change it in the future will have to present legislation in order to do that, and not through regulations.
Meaning, because of this controversy, the government could actually add tougher Greenbelt protections.
I don't trust this government at all to fix a mess of their own making. I don't trust them not to include giant loopholes.
Today, the Green Party leader wrote to the Integrity Commissioner asking him to trigger a public inquiry.
We can't let an 11th hour reversal become a get out of jail free card.
While the Liberals want other development plans examined, such as ones the housing minister fast-tracked.
MZOs across this province. Look at Highway 413, right? Look at who owns all the land around there.
We expect these types of questions to continue this week. The opposition trying to keep the scandal front and center, the government attempting to move past it. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
While MPPs returned to work inside Queen's Park today, there was a major protest outside the Ontario legislature.
Hands off our public health care!
Thousands of nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers gathered on the lawn at Queen's Park. They were protesting what they say are Premier Doug Ford's plans to privatize the healthcare system. The Ford government passed a bill last spring that allows private clinics to perform procedures covered by the provincial health plan. Critics say it's the beginning of a two-tiered system, but Ford says the move helps free capacity in Ontario's overburdened hospitals. Now to a startling new report from Children's Healthcare Canada. The advocacy group says thousands of kids are being left in surgical limbo, struggling with ongoing backlogs that are often pushing care beyond what is considered a medically safe waiting period. Tyler Cheese explains.
It's long been reported that children wait far longer for their surgeries than would be medically recommended or indicated.
A new report from Children's Healthcare Canada confirms what many doctors already knew. Thousands of children across the country are waiting longer than they should be for surgery.
There are defined targets for access to care in pediatric surgery through the Pediatric Canadian Access Targets Initiative.
He says these long waits can have negative impacts on both the physical and mental health of patients.
The duration between the diagnosis and the surgery wait was very challenging.
Kendra West Pettigrew's daughter Madison waited a year for scoliosis surgery. That surgery finally happened back in 2020. But West Pettigrew says she's aware that many others are still waiting.
And it's very challenging and it's heartbreaking because there's a lot of youth that are suffering and in a lot of pain and going through their own adjustments through psychological, mental understanding of what's going on to them.
El Hawari says scoliosis should be treated within 3 to 6 months depending on the age of the patient, but
we're not meeting those targets across the country.
At Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, the situation is no different.
We here at Sick Kids have 6,500 patients on our waiting list, and 65% of them are out of window, which is beyond the recommended treatment time.
And it's not just an issue for patients. The backlog is putting additional strain on the whole healthcare system.
Yeah, there are financial implications to children not getting their surgery in time.
So it ends up being a vicious cycle because these patients are waiting longer, will use more resources and pull those away from other patients that are waiting.
Experts say the backlog will likely take years to fix, and they're calling for a sustained effort from all governments to address the issue. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, nearing the end of September here, and it's 18 degrees and cloudy tonight as we look live at the city. Colette is here with a first look at the forecast and another balmy September evening, Colette.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. We kind of went from a summer where we really couldn't count on things, at least in terms of the weather, and now the end of summer and into fall, we get this nice run of weather. So our days are getting a little shorter in terms of our daylight. We're just around or just under 12 hours, but still making the most of it. So this is a nice view of the sunset, but why don't we check out the sunrise tomorrow morning at 7:09 and sunset tomorrow evening at 7:07. Close to those 12 hours. Daytime highs today today. We did get up to 24 at one point and then cooled back down to around 22. Look at Hamilton, though, with that breeze coming in off the east, off the lake, kept temperatures a little cooler. Elsewhere, though, some really nice numbers. Have to deal still with this instability to the west of us and into southwestern Ontario. So still some of these pop-up showers through the overnight and lingering into early tomorrow morning. We'll just get a little cloud cover towards the city, and then that really breaks away and we get into mostly sunny skies. But southwestern Ontario, some of this instability kind of hangs around for the next few days. More on that coming up. Tonight, the low 16, 20 for that high tomorrow afternoon, Chris.
All right, looks beautiful. We'll see you in a few minutes, Colette. Evening classes at Durham College were canceled tonight after a stabbing left one person injured. It happened at the Whitby campus just before 5 tonight, and the campus was put into lockdown for this police investigation. Durham Regional Police say one person was stabbed and suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The lockdown was lifted a short time later. Police have not said if any arrests were made, but Durham College says there is no risk to the campus community. Criminal charges against a construction company in connection with a deadly crash in Barrie have been withdrawn by the Crown. Condrain Group was charged with 6 counts of criminal negligence causing death after the crash in August of 2022 that left 6 young people dead. The victims were heading to a casino at around 6 in the morning when their car crashed into a deep pit at a construction site. The company says in a written statement that it has always had confidence in the justice system, adding it remains committed to the community and moving forward from this heartbreaking tragedy. Unifor says it will turn to negotiations with General Motors after members voted to accept its labor agreement with Ford. The 3-year agreement includes signing bonuses and the largest wage increase in company history. Yet just over half of members voted in favor of the deal that would see their wages increase by 15% over the next 3 years. The talks with GM will begin tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the U.S., auto workers remain off the job. Their union is demanding a 40% wage increase over a similar time period. They've been striking since September 15th. Meanwhile, the union representing Hollywood writers have finally reached a tentative deal with major studios, potentially ending their 5-month-long strike. But many actors in the States are still on strike, and the industry's labor action south of the border continues to have a huge impact on the film and television work being pumped out of our city. Greg Ross takes a look.
I've been in the industry for over 10 years now, and it's never been this slow.
Toronto-based actor Yasmin Lau says it's been a tough year with writers and actors striking in the U.S. She says about 70% of the work she does is through U.S. productions. She hopes the news of a tentative deal with writers will at least get things moving again.
Hopefully they will start with the pre-production, at least with the auditions that will get going.
Even with the writers heading back to work, an ongoing actor strike means full production will still be on hold.
In Ontario, about 55 to 60% of the work that is done here is actually from away. So most of that being US foreign production work. So really, it has had a massive impact on the work that is done here.
Alistair Hepburn is the executive director of ACTRA Toronto, which represents about 15,000 performers in Ontario. He says even if the actors' strike ends relatively quickly, they'll need some time to get the industry up and running in Toronto again.
We likely won't see a major impact in Toronto until the end of this year. We need to get the SAG-AFTRA strike solved before we will see a return to full production levels in Toronto.
It's not just writers and actors that have been out of work as a result of these strikes. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees Union represents 5,500 workers in Toronto. This was welcome news for their members.
Absolutely, there is a tremendous sense of relief in the industry in both countries, knowing that there is at least a tentative agreement, obviously subject to ratification by the membership.
IATSE International Vice President John Lewis says he hopes this deal creates a bit of a domino effect and the Actors Union follows suit. He also hopes these deals will help his own union's negotiations, which are on the very near horizon.
The Toronto Film Local is going into bargaining in January, so trust me, there is a sense of relief knowing that at least the writers is done, and hopefully we'll see the actors done before we have to go to the table.
IATSE's contract will end in March. Greg Ross, CBC News.
Welcome back. This year's news cycle has been dominated by discussions about the cost of living, especially when it comes to housing. And tonight, CBC Toronto is launching a week-long series all about how tough it is to afford rent. Shannon Martin begins that coverage with a look at rent controls.
Ontario is open for business.
Back in 2018, a newly elected provincial government wanted to give developers a reason to build rentals. So the Ford government rolled back some rent controls. If you lived in a unit, your rent was still protected, but any newly built units or newly converted units would have zero rent control regulations. At the time, the government said this would help create market-based incentives for supply growth, meaning developers could make more money from rentals and therefore would naturally want to build more of them. Taking away rent control was supposed to make all of that happen, and it worked. Sort of.
My name is Sean Hildebrand. I'm president of a company called Urbanation. We've been tracking the market for over 4 decades now.
According to Urban Nation's research, when Ford took away rent control, the city saw a huge jump in proposed rental buildings.
There's a large inventory of rental projects in the GTA that are proposed for development, meaning they have submitted an application.
Developers applied to build more than 90,000 new rental units. Sounds like that could put a dent in Toronto's supply problem, right? But here's the thing, only 1/3 of those applications actually got the green light. And for those that did get the go-ahead to start building, construction isn't exactly easy right now. Building in Toronto is slow and expensive.
Very few projects start construction over the last number of quarters, and this is due to high construction costs, it's due to labor shortages, it's due to approval delays in getting these projects shovel-ready.
And perhaps not surprisingly, higher interest rates means it costs more to build than it did a few years ago.
Developers need to take out loans to build these projects, so when rates rise, it hurts the economic viability of proceeding with development as well. So there's some very real negative consequences.
A report by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in 2021 found that costs associated with building, including everything from land to government charges, even underground parking, were just too high to make it worthwhile for many developers. And that's even without rent control in place. That report found that depending on the location and size, some rental buildings could still be profitable enough to attract developers. And it is true that in spite of all these challenges, more rental buildings are going up now than in the last 10 years. But don't expect it to solve Toronto's rental problems overnight.
The staggering length of time it takes between when a purpose-built rental is proposed and then it actually being ready to move into. Isn't Toronto one of the slowest cities in the world for getting it done?
Yeah, it's I think it's 100 months between development application submission and actually having the project completed. Part of that is due to slow approvals. Part of that is due to the lengthy time it takes to build a rental building or any apartment building.
100 months to develop and build a rental building? That's more than 8 years. The reality is that new builds won't be able to keep pace with the surging demand in Toronto.
We have seen an increase in housing construction generally, about 40% increase from pre-2019, both in Toronto and across the country. So the planning departments are approving permits faster, the builders are building homes faster, but they're still not keeping up.
We're projecting rental demand in the GTA to increase by over 300,000 units in the next 10 years. If you look at the amount of supply that could come online from purpose-built rentals and also condo rentals, we're going to see a shortfall of 170,000 units, and that's under a pretty optimistic scenario.
And a new building years from now doesn't mean much to someone who needs an apartment today.
Yeah, really important series here from Shannon, and you can head to our website to watch the full video and so much more. And we'll have more on renting. We'll hear directly from renters themselves as well throughout the week. And we'll be right back. to you, Colette. And other than the pretty comfortable evenings, it's been really feeling like the middle of summer vacation lately.
Yeah, I guess at this point in the evening, the kids, or at least the younger ones, should be in bed, but maybe we've got some parents with us still making the lunches and getting things sorted for tomorrow. So we'll take a look at the recess forecast. If you're wondering if it's going to be as mild as it was today, well, the morning hours will be on the mild side, but just a tiny bit cooler. Still a very lovely day shaping up, a bit more cloud cover to start things off at 10 o'clock, 17, how about that, 18, and then 20 by 2 p.m. And yes, we'll have those winds out of the east, and those will still be breezy. That'll keep the temperature just a little bit cooler there off the western end of Lake Ontario, like around Hamilton, as we saw today. And the other thing to keep in mind is some of this instability into southwestern Ontario and even extreme western parts of the GTA. We've got an area of low pressure, like everything's just sort of in a holding pattern thanks to this ridge of high pressure. Most of the GTA, most of Lake Ontario falls into the fair side of things with the clear skies, and then Lake Erie and back through Michigan is where we see that circulation. So at times some showers, even the chance of some isolated thunderstorms, and then I think we will see that again tomorrow morning, but we will then get some breaking up of this and drying out into the afternoon, so you get a bit of a break, and then it's going to rotate back in again. For Toronto, we'll just see the skies kind of clearing and getting into the mostly sunny conditions, and same thing into eastern Ontario. So that's kind of that dividing line between the unsettled conditions and what's happening with that strong ridge of high pressure. The temperatures overnight tonight around 16 with a low of 15 for Toronto, and Windsor you'll likely hit a low of 17, 18 through the overnight hours, but you got to check out with those clearer skies under that influence there. Yes, a little bit cooler with the single digit in the nation's capital. Up to 20 tomorrow. Wednesday, kind of a mix of sun and cloud and 19. And then Thursday, some increase in cloudiness. The temperature's all close to seasonal. Normal high at this time of year, Chris, is 18. So we're actually, as we head towards the weekend, and similar to today, going well 5 to 6 degrees above those seasonal norms at times.
All right, looks good. Thanks, Colette. And thank you for watching tonight. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 11. Have a great night.